Hello everyone, this is Anne from Lolli Grace and welcome to this tutorial about yet another way to transfer a pattern onto your fabric. And I have said this before, but tracing or trying to get your pattern onto your fabric, get this onto this, is really everyone's least favorite part of embroidery, I think. I mean, nobody likes it, right? You just want to get right to the stitching. But you got to get this onto this somehow. So let me talk about this method that uses a Lightbox and some sort of transfer pencil, or pen. So what you're going to need for this is your fabric stretched in a hoop, the Lightbox, of course. You'll need your pattern that is cut out in a circle that will fit behind the hoop, some masking tape, and whatever you're going to transfer with. You can use this method on light fabrics, white fabrics, or dark fabrics. I am using this gray fabric, so I would consider this a dark fabric. So that is why I am using the gel pen. It's white and it is made to show up on dark surfaces. So a lot of scrapbookers use this for dark papers like black paper, but I am using it on this dark fabric. If I was using a light colored fabric or a white fabric, I would be using probably my Frixion erasable gel pen. But for this one, I'm going to be using the white. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to get your Lightbox set up with your pattern, and I am going to take just a few small pieces of masking tape and I'm going to tape this down so that the tape does not interfere with the design, but it's going to hold it in place so it doesn't shift while I am putting the hoop over it. Now, I normally stitch with my hoop like this, but for this method it's going to be easier if we flip it over and if we trace on this side. So if your fabric happens to have a right side or a wrong side, this one really doesn't. It's the same on either side, so it doesn't matter how I put it in the hoop. But if for some reason your fabric has a right side, you're going to want the right side of the fabric, in other words, the side that you're going to have, it's going to be the top of your stitching, to be here, not here for right now, for while you're tracing. Okay? That might be if you are stitching on a fabric that has like a printed design on it, like dots or lines or whatever, floral. You're going to want to have the correct side of the fabric on this side. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my Lightbox on so you can see that right there. Let me move this over to the center a little bit, like that. Okay, so now I'm going to lay this onto the Lightbox, and you can see the advantage of this is that I can see how to line this up on the circle. I mean, I could have, like this one, I could have taped a piece of paper like this. It's the same exact design. I could have taped it on right here, but it would have been a little bit tricky to figure out where to place the hoop. So this is very convenient because I can see the outline of the circle that I cut out, and I am going to line that up so it's centered. And now I'm going to take some longer pieces of masking tape like this. I do not want this to shift while I am tracing, because then my design will get all messed up. So I'm going to get this in place, make sure it's right where I want it. And I'm going to put a piece of masking tape here. I'm going to make sure that tape is on the hoop. It doesn't necessarily have to stick to the fabric. I do want it to stick to the hoop, and then I'm going to tape it onto the side of the Lightbox. And I'm going to do that on all four sides so that this thing is really stable. I do not want this to shift while I am tracing. So I'll do it on that side. I'll do it on the bottom. Like that, and up here. So now you can see that this thing is not going anywhere. No matter what I do to it, it's stable. So the paper underneath is taped, and now the hoop is taped. So now I can start tracing. Once you have everything taped in place so it won't move, then you can start tracing. And I have done a little bit of tracing, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. So hopefully you can see, like, I have not traced suite yet, but I have traced home and a line across here and this line. And let me talk to you about lighting, and you may just have to figure out what works best for you. Sometimes it's best to have all the lights off and only let the light from the light box shine up through. I happen to have the light that I'm videoing with, and it's pretty high up. And I've discovered that I can leave it on and I can see not only the lines that I'm going to be tracing, but I can also see the lines after I have traced them. And what can happen if you don't have a setup like this, and I've done it this way too, is it's really hard to see at the same time both the light shining through the fabric so that you can see the black lines, and if it's backlit like that, it's hard to see the lines that you've just traced. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to turn off this bright light. So now you can see great. You can see really well the black lines that you're going to be tracing, but it's really impossible to see the lines as you are tracing them with the gel pen. So I've done it that way, and what I do in that case, if you just can't get a light to work so that you can have one up high where you can still see both the lines behind, the black lines and the lines you're tracing, I have a desk lamp. So I will use my gel pen and I will trace a line or trace several lines. Maybe I would trace this entire H or maybe this whole S. And then I have my desk lamp, my swing arm lamp that I can turn on and off easily. And so then I would turn it on and I would say, okay, yeah, I got the entire line and all of these dots, or I got every line traced on the H, and now I can turn this light off again and go on and trace, say, for instance, the O. And when that's done, I would turn this light back on and I would double check just to make sure that I didn't miss anything, because it is easy to miss some lines when all you can see is just the black lines and you can't see what line you've traced. So I kind of would toggle back and forth between having this light off and doing some tracing, and then I would flip it on, make sure that I got all the lines, and I'd flip it off. So you can see how that would work. So I am going to leave that light off, and I am going to turn this one back on. And I will do a little bit of tracing just to show you, though, what it's like to trace with the gel pen. Before I show you me actually tracing with the gel pen, let me talk about the gel pen for just a minute. These are great. They are opaque on dark surfaces, like if you're going to write on a black piece of paper or this dark fabric. They work great. They are a little bit finicky. My first suggestion is when you have one to store it upside down with the tip down so that the ink always stays down there. If you store it with the tip up, the ink kind of runs out of the tip. So if you store it down, that will help get that ink to stay in the tip. They sometimes don't want to, the ink doesn't want to write right when you start using them. So I always keep you can use a piece of white paper, although it's a little hard to see. So this is just a scrap piece of cardboard that I've cut from a box. And so I always keep this next to me when I'm working so that I can make some little scribbles and I can kind of just get that ink moving. And so once it's moving, I know it's working, and now I can come over to the fabric and I can trace. It won't always give you a super bright line, a super bright white line immediately, so you have to maybe make a kind of a light line and then maybe go over it. I think on the S you can see on this part right here, I only went over it once. And then this section right here, I kind of traced back over my lines after I did them the first time, and I think you can see these are a little bit wider. But you can see either one, but just know that you can't always go back over them carefully. And so now I'm going to work on this W. And if you've seen any of my videos before about tracing patterns, you know I always give this tip as well. It is easier to have control when you are working with the pen when you're pulling a line towards you, as opposed to moving from side to side or trying to make a line going up. So it's a little bit trickier when I've got this huge light box right here. But say, for instance, I'm going to trace this W. So I'm going to work slowly. And because I sort of talked a little bit, you can see how my pen did not make a really white line. So let me just kind of get that ink going a little bit, and I may have to go over each of these lines. So I'm going to pull a line towards me, and I'm going to stop. And I'm going to come back up here. It's a little bitty short line, so it's not that big of a deal. And I'm going to again pull a line towards me. And then these lines are so short, I can just work up. If they were really long lines, I would not do that. But so that's the first half of the W. And now I'm going to come up here, come towards me, pull towards me, and now I'm going to stop. And instead of coming this way and then working back up so that I'm going that direction, I'm going to stop what I'm doing, stop that line right there, come back up to the top, and pull this line towards me and meet that one. Same thing on the other side. So you can see right there the ink didn't really show up too well, so I'm just going to go over that line. And that is the W traced there. So now if I was going to do the E, I would come across. I've sort of turned my hand, so I'm kind of working like this. The E, let me see. I'm going to sort of break my rule and go this way. But now I can pull towards me and stop. I could always take the light box and turn it this way so that now I am pulling a line towards me. And then turn it back. And now I'm pulling towards me again. And if I wanted to do that leg of the E, I would turn it again and finish those two lines. Another thing that will help keep your hand a little bit steadier is to brace your hand. I'm using the side of my hand and I'm bracing it on the hoop. And I'm also, depending on where I am working, I will brace my hand with this pinky finger. So when I'm tracing, I'm not just letting my arm just hang in the air and have like a free arm motion. I am bracing my hand, and so I have a nice, it's sort of resting on two spots maybe. And then that way when I am trying to be very accurate with my tracing, my hand is not kind of just hanging up in the air. It is actually braced against the hoop. So let me show you just a little bit of what I was talking about earlier. If you don't have a light that is up high, it's hard to see both the background lines and the lines you're tracing. So let me turn this light off. And so in there I can see my black lines, the pattern lines very clearly. So I am going to trace this line. But it is impossible to see whether or not that ink has shown up. I've traced it, I've used the pen, but because of the light coming from behind it, there's no light coming on top of it, I can't tell. So I will turn a light back on. Let me turn this one on. And you can see that they did show up. And occasionally I've had it happen where I have traced a whole section and I turn the light on and I realize, well, the ink just was not flowing and I just did not get it traced. So you just do it again. Once you have finished tracing the entire pattern, now you can take it off of the light box. But I'm going to give you a really good piece of advice. Before you just untape it and take it off, spend a good couple of minutes making sure, looking over every part of your pattern to make sure that you have traced everything. I can't tell you how many times I have traced a design, thought I got everything, and then I go to stitch it and I realize I left out, like when I stitched this one originally, I left out this line right here completely. So just take a few minutes, make sure you got everything before you take it all apart. So now I can turn the light box off, I can untape it, like that. Get all that tape off. And you can see that there is my trace design. Now you can stitch it like this, with it upside down in the hoop like this. Let me move this light box out of the way. Or you can take the fabric out. Personally, I prefer to stitch my patterns with the hoop facing like this, with the screw on the outside and the fabric facing down. A lot of people stitch like this. That's fine. You just do whatever is most comfortable for you. So there is another way to transfer a design onto fabric, either light or dark, using a gel pen, and hopefully I gave you some good tips that will help make this task a little bit easier. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.